25.17 is going to feature a bunch more off-meta jungle buffs. We've got some pretty big lethality item buffs, while Gwen and Master Yi are both on the nerf list. So we'll be breaking everything down and providing you guys an update to the solo queue tier list for every single role. And it's no secret that League's ranking system is designed to trap you. It pulls you in with those games where everything clicks and you carry hard, only to balance it with frustrating matches that feel unwinnable from the start. This cycle keeps you grinding, hoping for change, but never quite breaking through. What most players don't realize is that escaping this cycle requires specific skills and strategies tailored to your exact rank. That's where SkillCapped comes in. We're the only service in this industry that has invested millions of dollars into identifying what actually works at every tier. Our challenger coaches have mapped out the best and most useful strategies that turn hard-stuck players into consistent climbers. And you can access all this expertise for less than $9 a month with our annual plan. We're so confident in our method that our business model depends on your success. Climb at least 5 divisions while actively using SkillCapped or claim a full refund. No questions asked. Stop wasting time on the ranked treadmill. Start climbing today with proven strategies designed specifically to break through your current rank. Check us out by clicking the link in the top right corner or in the description below. And with that being said, let's get into it. So one of 2 lethality items that will be buffed for this patch is Profane Hydra. Cost of the item is dropping from 3,200 all the way down to 2,850. However, the AD is dropping from 60 to 55 to compensate. Even with losing 5 AD though, this is still a net buff because 5 AD has a gold value of 175, while the cost of Profane is dropping by 350. So you're gaining 175 gold of efficiency for 25.17. Because of such a drastic cost decrease, we will likely see Profane Hydra become a much more appealing rush item. Champs like Qiyana and Rengar would more regularly pick up Profane as a second item in recent patches, but with cost going down by so much, rushing it will be way stronger. Quinn is someone who will be loving this patch, as she was the one champion in recent patches who was rushing Profane at a pretty high rate, so Quinn will be one of the best top laners. A few other champs who have potential with the item include Kha'Zix, Lethality Jarvan, Talon, and Wukong. And then the second lethality item receiving a buff for this patch is Axiom Arc, as the cost of the item will be dropping from 3,000 to 2,750. So 250 gold cheaper now, and it will be interesting to see if this is enough to bring the priority on Axiom Arc up for 25.17. The champions who have been purchasing it more sparingly who should be liking this buff the most include Nocturne, Talon, Sion, Pyke, Zed, Kayn, Qiyana, Rengar, and Misfortune. Even if Axiom does become a more viable item on those champs, it's probably not going to be purchased until your third item, so the buff likely won't be as impactful as the one of Profane Hydra. Some games won't even last long enough for you to be able to take advantage of the Axiom Arc buff, whereas with Profane Hydra, because it's at latest a second purchase, its buff will be felt in pretty much every single game. And then the third item that will be buffed for this patch is Horizon Focus. Cost is dropping from 2,800 to 2,750, while the AP is going up from 115 to 125. Horizon has been a pretty niche item in recent patches, not prioritized nearly as much as other AP items, but with the item gaining 250 gold worth of efficiency, it'll help out a few champs. Vel'Koz, Xerath, Ziggs, Zoe, Ahri, Hwei, and Lux are a few of the champs that have the most potential with Horizon Focus, while Xerath and Vel'Koz in specific were the 2 champs building the item the most in recent patches, so they should see a small spike in win rate this patch due to the buff. So moving on to the top lane changes now, we have a few buffs for Aurelia that won't really affect her power level unless you're playing a wacky off-meta AP build. WAP ratio based on channel time is going up from 40 scaling to 120% to 50 scaling to 150%. EAP ratio is up as well from 80 to 100%, while E cooldown is being reduced from 16 scaling to 12 seconds to 16 scaling to 10 seconds. So unless Nashor's Tooth becomes meta on Aurelia, the only change that is of significance is the E cooldown buff. And since you max your E out last, it's actually very unimpactful, as you won't even begin feeling the effects of the change until you hit level 14 and take a second point in E. As a result, no movement for Aurelia on the tier list for this patch, as she will remain in the top lane A tier. So Riot has decided to buff top lane Kayn for this patch, as they are reducing the mana cost on his Q and W. Q mana cost is going down from 50 to 40, and then W mana cost is being lowered from 60 scaling to 80 to 40 scaling to 60. Top lane Kayn has hovered between a 44 and 46% win rate in recent patches, so with these buffs coming through, we would actually see him being a decent pickup. The buffs likely add around 2% win rate, so at the very least, Kayn should be a viable top lane champ that you can play as a counter into specific favorable matchups. Kayn is going to work best into tanks who lack significant early game kill threat, whereas bruisers like Darius, Renekton, or Riven are going to give him a lot more issues. So we can't really see Kayn placing any higher than B tier due to these buffs, so we're going to be placing him there for now, but if the buffs aren't quite enough to warrant that B tier spot, we could drop him into C for mid patch. So Gwen has been a pretty problematic champion in the higher tiers of play, while actually being on the weaker side in the average tiers of solo queue, but because of her pro play dominance, the champ has been heavily nerfed for 25.17. Armor is being reduced from 36 to 33. Our initial slow is dropping from 60% at all ranks to 30 scaling to 60%. Our subsequent slow is going to be lowered as well from 25% at all ranks to 15 scaling to 25%. And then attack speed growth is actually getting buffed, going from 2.25 5 to 2.5%. So 30% off that initial slow on R is a pretty massive change, as the slow is just straight up being cut in half. Armor nerf is also going to negatively impact her in the majority of meta matchups, as there aren't too many AP top laners being picked at significant rates in solo queue. So we think Gwen will now be one of the weakest top lane champs that you can play moving forward, and are going to be demoting her down to C tier for 25.17. For the elite tiers of play, we can still see Gwen being a solid pick, but for the majority of ranks, there's just going to be many champions who are far superior in power. So with the massive Rumble bug fix changes going through last patch, his win rate literally spiked up 5% and instantly became an S tier top lane pick. So Riot's pulling back a bit for 25.17. Rumble's passive damage is going to be lowered from 5 to 4% of the target's max health. Q damage will take a hit as well, with the base damage staying the same at rank 1, but from rank 2 onwards, the spell will be dealing less damage. So your level 1 to level 3 bully power with Rumble isn't really affected at all for next patch. However, especially once you get to level 9 and have Q fully maxed out, that's when the nerf will take full effect. We are expecting Rumble to lose a good chunk of power from these nerfs, so his time in the S tier won't last long at all, as we are dropping him into A for 25.17. And then Singed was the other top lane champ who was bug fixed last patch, so that he no longer deals less damage on red side, and the bug fix resulted in him turning into the highest win rate top lane champion for solo queue. So it's not much of a surprise to see some follow-up nerfs, as Riot will be lowering Q poison duration from 2.2 to 2 seconds, and reducing the max number of damage ticks from 9 to 8. So this will end up being a damage nerf to Singed Q, and we can see by looking at the comparison clips that at level 9 with Q fully maxed and on your Liandry's spike, damage from Q will be down from 590 to 573. Now if you're just hitting one enemy with Q, then this change doesn't seem all that bad, but imagine if you're running through a team fight and proccing Q on multiple enemies. Suddenly that loss in damage goes from being only 17 up to a max of 85. So we're leaning towards Singed losing his OP tier spot due to these nerfs, but we still think he should remain a strong top lane pickup, so we'll only be dropping him into S. So we have a look at the top lane tier list. Lots of moving parts for this patch, as Singed, Rumble, and Gwen drop down, while Kayn, Warwick, and Quinn are moving up. So for Quinn, she is indirectly buffed this patch due to the Profane Hydra changes, and with the item being 350 gold cheaper now, it's just going to allow the champ to spike earlier on and snowball even harder than before. It turns out that the Warwick nerfs from last patch really didn't affect his power level all that much, so with Singed dropping out of OP tier, we're going to be promoting Warwick back up. So our 3 OP picks for top lane right now are all very strong lane dominant picks who have a lot of agency over how the early game plays out. So it's another patch with a bunch of off meta junglers receiving buffs, as Neela is first up with her Q splash damage to monsters being increased from 10 to 100%. Riot has already stated that they don't expect for Neela to actually be a viable jungler for solo queue due to this buff, and should just be more of a for fun pick that you play in normals. So for now, we're just going to be placing her in the jungle C tier, and we'll see if she ends up gaining any sort of traction as the patch rolls out. Jungle Set is going to be buffed with his E bonus monster damage going up from 100 flat to 125, scaling to 250 based on level. Keep in mind that you don't level up your E until level 2 on Set Jungle, so you're actually gaining 132 damage instead of 125 at level 2. Set Jungle's had a non-existent play rate in recent patches, so there's literally nothing we can go off of to predict how powerful he'll actually be, and because of that, we'll place him in the C tier for now, as that's where Nautilus landed power-wise last patch after his buffs, so we'd expect something similar for Set. Vayne Jungle is going to become stronger for this patch, as her W damage to monsters is being changed from dealing % damage to now having a flat amount of 140 scaling to 200. So Riot has stated that this change won't actually increase DPS against red or blue, but will be a significant damage increase against every other monster camp that you hit. With all these off-meta junglers getting buffed, if you want to try them out for this patch and are unsure of what the most optimal clear is for each of them, the Jungle Clear Genius Shapeshift has a new clear guide out for Vayne, Set, and Neela, so if you want to master your jungle clears, then it's just one of the many great resources we have on our website to help you out. So overall, we're not expecting all that much out of these buffs. There's a chance Vayne turns into a decent jungler, but for now, we're going to be placing her in the C tier. So Kraken Slayer Master Yi has really taken off over the past patch, as we moved him into OP tier during our mid-patch tier list of 25.16, so Riot will be nerfing him. Base health is being reduced, going from 669 to 655. Q on hit ratio is going down as well from 75 to 65%. So what does this actually mean then in terms of Q damage drop off? Well, if you have your Kraken Slayer completed and proc the passive with your Q, it ends up being a drop from 485 to 471, so a 14 loss in damage. Taking both nerfs into account, Master Yi should lose enough power to remove him from the OP tier, but whether he falls as far down as A tier is harder to predict. For now, we're going to be placing Yi in S, as that's where we see him landing due to these nerfs, but in the off chance they are slightly more impactful than we think, he could drop to A tier for mid-patch. So here's how we have the jungle tier list aligned for 25.17, as the lone wolf, or should we say lone bear, up in the OP tier is Volibear. Volley is just in a league of his own right now, as he's been a top percentile jungler for a while, and with so many meta junglers nerfed in the past 2 patches, he's gained a bunch of relative power. Watch out for Rengar this patch, as he can look to take advantage of the Profane Hydra and Axiom Arc buffs, so we're going to be giving him a push up the tier list, going from B into A tier. With Morgana buffed for a 2nd patch in a row, she's a legitimate jungle option moving forward. Out of all the off-meta junglers who have been buffed recently, Morg is one who has been finding really good success in solo queue, so she's placed in A tier for now, but there's a small chance the buff could push her into S. It'll be interesting to see if Lethality Nocturne makes a comeback for 25.17, because Axiom Arc Rush could end up being quite good for him. To theorize, something like a Tiamat Rush into Axiom Arc and then Profane Hydra is a core build that will have a lot more viability moving forward, as the total cost of that 2-item core is now 600 gold cheaper, which is actually pretty insane. Rengar is definitely another champ who could look to utilize this core build, and possibly even Talon as well. As always, we'll be sure to keep you guys in the loop with any and all new builds that pop up throughout the patch in our future meta videos. A couple of Kassadin buffs are penciled in for this patch, as he's gaining some scaling strength on his Q and E. Q AP ratio is going up from 60 to 70%, which, as we can see in the comparison clips, equates to a 20 damage increase when you are on your 3-item core and have level 16. As for the E buff, its AP ratio is going up from 65 to 70%, and looking at the comparison clips, this is a 10 damage increase at level 16 with 3 items completed. So in total, you're gaining 30 extra damage to your burst combo in the later stages of the game, which isn't insignificant, but it's nothing too crazy either. Cass has just barely been below that S tier threshold in recent patches, so with these buffs going through, we're gonna give him a push from A into S. So Morgana mid lane is buffed for a 2nd patch in a row, as her W damage is up by 20 in the early game, and W mana cost at max rank is going down by 20. So mana off of a spell that you spam out off cooldown in the mid game is actually a pretty nice buff. The boost in damage is great as well to acquire lane priority a bit faster, so all around really solid buffs for Morgana. If you guys are looking to pick up Morgana mid for this patch, our challenger mid laner Shori has a new full game commentary on our website where he shows you how to play her effectively. So we'll be keeping Morgana in the mid lane S tier, as we don't think she'll be an OP tier pick with these buffs, but she'll be without question one of the most underrated S tier picks. So if we have a look at the mid lane tier list, other than Kassadin moving up due to his direct buffs, pay attention to champions who can rush Profane Hydra. Talon and Kiana should see a nice indirect boost in strength for this patch, and both champions are being placed in the mid lane S tier. Quinn mid is going to be extremely powerful for this patch as well. You don't see her played nearly as much in mid as you do in top, but she's arguably better as a mid laner, and with Profane Hydra buffed, if you're someone who likes playing those off-meta underrated champs, Quinn is definitely a high priority option for 25.17. So moving on to the bot lane now, AP Kog'Maw is going to receive a couple of buffs for this patch, as his Q AP ratio is going up from 80 to 90%. W max health ratio is up as well from 1% per 100 AP to 1.5% per 100 AP. And then our AP ratio will be increased from 35% at all ranks to 35 scaling to 45%. So overall, pretty light buffs for AP Kog'Maw. His E was not buffed at all, and that is the spell that is the most impactful in playing AP Cog. So with it going untouched, we don't expect him to become overly powerful with AP builds. That being said, AP builds really hadn't been performing all that bad on Kog'Maw in recent patches, so these changes could be all that Cog needs to bring more attention to Eludens into Archangel's core. Regardless, Kog'Maw will remain in a great spot for 25.17, as he'll continue to be placed in the ADC S tier. We got a pretty minor buff headed Misfortune's way, with her base AD going up from 53 to 55. A buff like this likely adds around 0.5% win rate to the champ, so MF should be on the outside looking in for an S tier position. We don't think the buff will be quite enough to propel her into S though, so she'll remain in A for now. So it's a very light patch for ADC in 25.17, which means there's no significant movement on the tier list. OP tier will remain the same as where we had it last patch, with Jinx and Sivir leading the way. Apparently Yanara is going to be issued a few bug fix changes for 25.17, so we'll have to keep an eye on exactly how that affects her power level. If you notice her win rate drop off a bit at the start of the patch, then it'll be because of those bug fix changes going through. It's the way Yanara interacts with Hurricane and Kraken Slayer that is getting fixed, so we could end up seeing Kraken lose its priority as Yanara's best rush item. So if you're a Yanara player, then just keep an eye out on the stats when the patch goes live, and if you notice Kraken Slayer completely fall off a cliff in terms of win rate, then swapping over to either Yuntal or Blade of the Ruined King would be the play. For now, we're not going to drop her down the tier list because it's hard to tell how impactful bug fix changes will land, but we'll be sure to keep you guys updated during our mid-patch tier list if we decide to move Yanara down. So unless you count the Morgana changes, Senna is the lone support change for this patch, as her attack speed per level is going up from 2 to 2.6%. Q healing will be increased as well from 40 scaling to 100 to 40 scaling to 120. Pretty minor buffs overall, and we don't see Senna climbing back into meta with these changes, but she likely won't be worthy of a C tier spot anymore, so she'll get bumped up one tier into B. So this is how we'll have the support tier list constructed for 25.17, as Melio and Nami will continue to lock down the OP tier. Watch out for Vel'Koz and Xerath this patch, as the Horizon Focus buffs will add a bit of additional power to them. In the past, we actually saw Horizon Focus rushed on Vel'Koz cause, so there's a very good chance that strategy makes a comeback for 25.17. The Morgana W damage buff will help her out a little bit for support, as helping your ADC push and acquire priority becomes stronger for this patch, but we don't think the buff will be enough to warrant a push up into S tier, so A is where Morg will land. Other than that, Riot didn't give us much else that will impact the support role, so we can expect for the meta to remain pretty much as to where it was in 25.16. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit SkillCapped.com and see the difference. So that's gonna wrap everything up for the 25.17 solo queue tier list. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.